Billie Holiday was rejected by her father 3 times throughout her life. First rejection when Billie was born. Clarence Holiday was a young guitarist, and when he got 16-year-old Sadie Fagan pregnant, he didn't marry her, didn't acknowledge the child, and disappeared. Second rejection when Billie was 10 years old. Clarence was playing in Fletcher Henderson's famous orchestra at the time, and Billie visited him backstage. Little Billie said, "Dad, I'm your daughter." Clarence looked at her coldly and said, "I'm nobody's father. Get out of here." Third rejection when Billie was 20, already a rising jazz star. She approached Clarence and said, "Will you take me into your orchestra? I can sing." Clarence replied, "You're not talented enough, and I don't do nepotism." Billie cried that day but didn't give up. Years later, Billie became famous, and Clarence was dying. In 1937, when Clarence was bedridden with pneumonia, he sent word to Billie, "I want you to come," but it was too late. Billie didn't go to his funeral, but that night she went on stage and gave the most painful, most emotional performance of the night. That night she sang "Strange Fruit" for the first time, not for her father, but as a message to the whole world. And that message was, even if you reject me, I will remain standing. If you're interested in family dramas, rejection stories, and the healing power of music, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications, because we'll continue sharing the painful truths behind famous artists, the family secrets nobody tells. On April 7, 1915, a baby was born in Baltimore. Her mother, Sadie Fagan, was 16 years old, unmarried, and the father was missing. The baby was named Eleonora Fagan. The world would know her as Billie Holiday, but that day she was just an unwanted baby. Clarence Holiday was 18 at the time, a talented guitarist at the beginning of his career. When Sadie told him she was pregnant, Clarence's answer was clear. "This isn't my problem." He didn't propose marriage, didn't want to see the baby, and left Baltimore. He went to New York, pursued his music career, and never came back. Sadie was left alone, young, and desperate. Her family rejected her because pregnancy out of wedlock was a huge shame at the time. After giving birth, Sadie had to work, and baby Eleonora was raised by relatives, sometimes grandmother, sometimes aunts, sometimes nobody. Eleonora spent her childhood in neglect, not enough food, not enough love, and definitely no father. While other children played with their fathers, Eleonora just watched. While other children said, "My daddy loves me," Eleonora quietly asked, "Where's my dad?" Sadie didn't answer, or when she did, she lied. "Your father is dead," but the truth was more painful. Her father was alive. He just didn't want her. By the time she turned 10, Eleonora learned who her father was, Clarence Holiday. A famous guitarist, playing in Fletcher Henderson's orchestra. Eleonora's heart raced. Her father was famous, successful, and maybe now he might want her. Maybe Clarence just didn't know about her existence. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Eleonora, filled with hope, and made a plan. She would find her father, tell him who she was, and maybe finally have a father. But Eleonora didn't know, some hopes exist to be broken, and some fathers never become fathers. That in 1925, the Fletcher Henderson Orchestra came to perform in Baltimore. When 10-year-old Eleonora heard the news, she got excited. Her father was in town. This was her chance. Eleonora begged her mother, "Mom, I want to see my dad. Please take me." Sadie hesitated. Years ago, Clarence had abandoned her, and Sadie still felt the pain. But when she saw the hope in her daughter's eyes, she couldn't resist. She said, "Okay, but don't get your hopes up too much." On the night of the concert, Eleonora wore her best dress, combed her hair, and went backstage. Her heart was beating so fast it could almost be heard. Backstage was crowded. Musicians were packing up their instruments, managers were talking, and everyone was tired. Eleonora looked around and saw a man, tall, handsome, cleaning his guitar. Sadie whispered, "That's your father." Eleonora approached slowly, hesitantly. Clarence didn't look at her. Eleonora got closer and finally spoke. "Hello, I'm Eleonora." Clarence looked up and stared. There was no recognition in his face. Eleonora continued. "I'm your daughter, Sadie's daughter." Clarence's face changed. He wasn't surprised, wasn't happy, just went cold. Eleonora didn't understand. She repeated. "But my mom said, you're my father." Clarence raised his voice. "Your mother's lying. I don't know you. Get out of here." Eleonora froze. People around looked. Sadie stepped forward and yelled at Clarence, "How can you do this? She's your daughter." Clarence turned and looked coldly at Sadie. "You got proof?" "No." "Then this conversation is over." Sadie grabbed Eleonora's hand and took her out. Eleonora was crying, silently, tears streaming down her cheeks. When they got outside, Sadie hugged her daughter and said, "I'm sorry, baby. I warned you." But Eleonora was inconsolable. She'd seen her father for the first time, and been rejected for the first time. That night, Eleonora learned something. Sometimes family isn't about blood, it's about love, and there was no love in Clarence's blood. After that night, Eleonora never mentioned her father. When friends asked, "Who's your dad?" she'd say, "He's dead." It was easier, but inside there was an emptiness, an unfillable void. Eleonora took refuge in music. She started singing first at home, then in church choir, then in small clubs. Her voice was different, broken, sad, but powerful. People listened and were moved. At 14, Eleonora changed her name, no longer Eleonora Fagan, but Billie Holiday. Billie came from her favorite actress. Holiday was her father's last name. It was ironic. She carried the name of the man who rejected her. In the early 1930s, Billie moved to New York. She started singing in Harlem jazz clubs, and quickly became known. Her voice was unique, every note, a story, every song a confession. Listeners cried, critics praised, and Billie rose. But success couldn't ease the pain of growing up fatherless. After every performance, Billie would sit alone in her dressing room, and think, "Does my father hear me now? Is he proud, or does he still not care?" She didn't know the answer, but she was about to find out. In 1933, Billie was 18, and already a recognized name. One day she heard from a friend, the Fletcher Henderson Orchestra was in New York, and looking for a female vocalist. Billie's heart raced. The Henderson Orchestra was prestigious, and singing there would launch an artist's career to the top, and Billie had an advantage. Her father Clarence still played guitar in that orchestra. Maybe this time would be different. Billie wasn't a child anymore. She was famous now, and maybe Clarence would accept her this time. Maybe he'd be a father. Maybe he'd help. Billie convinced herself, and went to the orchestra's rehearsal space, but she didn't know the second rejection was coming. When Billie Holiday entered the rehearsal room, Clarence Holiday saw her immediately. 8 years had passed since their last meeting, but Clarence remembered. Billie approached, this time more brave, more powerful. She said, "Hello, Clarence. I'm Billie, Billie Holiday." Clarence turned his face away, and continued messing with his instrument. Billie continued, "I heard the orchestra is looking for a female vocalist. I can sing. Maybe you could introduce me to Mr. Henderson." Clarence stopped, looked at Billie, and said in a cold voice, "You're not good enough." Billie was shocked. She said, "But you've never heard me. How can you know?" Clarence replied, "Because Henderson only takes the best. You're just a club singer." Billie felt this wasn't just about music. This was personal. She said, "I'm your daughter. Won't you help me?" Clarence's face hardened. He said, "You're not my daughter, and I don't do nepotism. Now get out of here. I need to work." Billie made one last attempt. "Just one chance. Just let me talk to Mr. Henderson." Clarence stood up and approached Billie. He lowered his voice, but his words were sharp. "If you come here again, I'll call security. Now get lost." Billie backed away. Musicians around watched silently. Billie left, head held high, but broken inside. When she got outside, Billie didn't cry. She was too angry, too hurt, but she didn't cry. She promised herself, I'll make it without him. I don't need him. And she did. Billie Holiday rose even without Fletcher Henderson. She sang at other clubs, signed with other record companies, and found her own way. By 1935, Billie was more famous than Clarence, and ironically, Clarence noticed, and this time Clarence would come, but for money. In 1935, Billie Holiday was 20 years old and successful. She was making records, working at famous clubs, and earning money. One day there was a knock on her door. When Billie opened it, Clarence Holiday was standing there. Billie was shocked, but didn't show it. She said, "What do you want?" Clarence smiled, as if nothing had happened, and said, "Billie, my daughter, I wanted to see you. How are you?" Billie looked coldly. She said, "Now I'm your daughter. I wasn't when you rejected me twice, but now I am." Clarence was uncomfortable, but continued, "Billie, I made mistakes in the past, but you're successful now, and I'm proud." Billie laughed, a bitter laugh. She said, "Proud, or do you want money?" Clarence fell silent, then he was honest. "I have financial problems. I need a little help." Billie understood. Clarence hadn't come for fatherhood, he'd come for money, but strangely, Billie gave him money. Why? Maybe because there was still hope, maybe because Clarence needed it. Or maybe because Billie wanted to prove, "I'm better than you. You rejected me, but I won't reject you." Clarence took the money, thanked her, and left. A week later he came again, and a month later again. Every time the same story. "Just this time I won't come again," but he always came. Billie gave money every time, because inside there was hope. Maybe one day Clarence would really be a father. Maybe one day he'd say more than thank you. Maybe one day he'd say I love you. But that day never came. In 1936, Clarence's visits increased. Now he wanted not just money, but favors. "Billie, could you introduce me to that club owner?" Or "Billie, could you talk to that record company for me?" Billie sometimes said yes, sometimes no, but the anger inside was growing. One day she couldn't take it and exploded. "You're just using me. You were never a father, and you're not now." Clarence was defensive. "Billie, I've changed. I made mistakes in the past, but I'm here now." Billie laughed bitterly. "You're here. You're only here for money. If I didn't have money, you wouldn't be here." Clarence couldn't argue, because Billie was right. Clarence left and didn't return for a while, but he'd be back, because he'd need the money more. In March 1937, Clarence Holiday got sick during a tour. He was in Dallas, Texas, and was diagnosed with pneumonia. At that time, pneumonia was a deadly disease. Antibiotics weren't widely available yet, and Clarence's condition rapidly worsened. He was hospitalized, and doctors advised him to notify his family. "Be prepared, he doesn't have much time." As Clarence lay in bed, he thought about his life, the music, his career, and his relationships. And he thought about Billie. He'd never known his daughter, never been a father, only used her money. Now he was dying, and maybe he felt regret, maybe his conscience hurt, or maybe he just didn't want to die alone. Clarence asked a friend to send word. "Send a telegram to New York, tell Billie Holiday her father is sick, very sick. I want her to come." The telegram reached Billie. Billie read it, put the telegram on the table, and stared for a long time. Her friend asked, "What will you do?" Billie replied, "Nothing. I'm not going." Her friend was shocked. "But he's your father, he's dying." Billie turned and looked at her friend. There were no tears in her eyes, just emptiness. She said, "He was never my father. He abandoned me when I was born. He rejected me when I was 10. He excluded me when I was an adult. And now when there's no money, when he's dying, he's calling for me. Too late." A few days later a second telegram arrived. Clarence Holiday died. He was 39 years old. Billie got the news, nodded, and continued with her work. His funeral was a few days later in Dallas. Billie didn't go. She sent her mother but didn't go herself. People asked, "Why didn't you go?" Billie replied, "Because he was already dead to me. He died years ago." But the truth inside was more complex. Billie didn't go because the pain was still too fresh. The anger was still too strong. And Billie hadn't forgiven. Maybe she never would. But that night, Billie would do something. She'd go on stage and pour her emotions into music. And that performance would be one of the most important moments in Billie Holiday's life. On the evening of the day Clarence Holiday died, Billie Holiday was supposed to perform. She had a show at a Harlem club and thought about canceling. But then she decided, no, she'd go on stage, because music was her therapy, music was her weapon, and music was her revenge. That night the club was full. People knew Billie's father had died. Word had spread and they wondered, would Billie show up? What would she look like? What would she say? The spotlight came on, and Billie walked onto the stage. There was no emotion on her face. She approached the microphone, closed her eyes and began to sing. The first songs went normally. Billie was singing as always, emotional, powerful but controlled. But then something changed. Billie leaned into the microphone and said, "Today my father died." The crowd went silent. Billie continued, "He was never a father to me. But he was still my father. And now he's dead." Billie stopped, took a breath and said, "I'm not going to sing this song for him. Because he doesn't deserve it. But I'll sing it for everyone. Because everyone needs to know, even if you reject someone, even if you abandon them, some people remain standing. And I'm standing." Then Billie began a song. But this was a song nobody had ever heard before. A protest song written by Abel Meeropol against racism, lynching, and injustice. Billie had seen the song before but never sang it. Because it was too dark, too painful, and too dangerous. But that night, the night her father died, Billie decided, I'll sing it. And she began. The song's name would later be known by everyone. Strange Fruit. The song was about corpses hanging from trees, about racial violence, and about pain. But that night for Billie, the song was more. It was about her father, about rejection, and about standing. As Billie Holiday sang Strange Fruit, her eyes were closed and tears streamed down her cheeks. Everyone in the club listened silently. Nobody moved, nobody spoke, nobody even breathed. Because everyone felt this wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a scream, and an act of resistance. When the song ended, the crowd stayed silent for a moment. Then applause erupted. People stood, cried, and saluted Billie. Billie leaned into the microphone and whispered, "Thank you." Then she left the stage and went to her dressing room. There she sat alone, tears on her face, and for the first time felt maybe her father's death wasn't an ending, but a beginning. Strange Fruit became Billie Holiday's career-defining song. It was recognized as a powerful protest against racism, and made Billie a symbol of the civil rights movement. But very few knew that song was also about Billie's relationship with her father, the rebellion of a rejected, abandoned, and ignored child. The hanging corpses in the song weren't just lynching victims, but also emotionally murdered people. And Billie had been emotionally murdered by her father. But Billie had been resurrected through music. And Strange Fruit was her resurrection march. In the following years Billie sang Strange Fruit hundreds of times. Each time emotional, each time powerful, and each time personal. People asked, "What's this song about?" Billie replied, "Injustice." But inside she added, "And my father." Because for Billie, justice wasn't just needed in courts but also in families. And her father hadn't treated her fairly. But Billie didn't take revenge. Billie just remained standing. And that was the greatest revenge. After Clarence Holiday died, Billie didn't talk about him. When asked in interviews, she gave short answers. He was a guitarist. But he wasn't in my life. She didn't give more details. But inside there was always an emptiness. Friends noticed Billie struggled in relationships with men she couldn't trust, couldn't attach, and usually chose the wrong men. Maybe because her father had abandoned her, and Billie expected abandonment. Maybe because Clarence had rejected her, and Billie thought rejection was normal. Or maybe because Billie had never seen real love and didn't know what it was like. In the 1940s and 1950s, Billie's life was very turbulent: bad marriages, drug addiction, and constant struggle. Some psychologists later analyzed the root of Billie's problems was in her childhood, in growing up fatherless, and in rejection trauma. One psychologist wrote, "Billie Holiday's father rejected her 3 times, and this rejection shaped Billie's entire life. Billie didn't feel worthy of love, Billie didn't trust herself, and Billie didn't believe she deserved happiness." This analysis is painful, but may be true. Because throughout her life, Billie searched for happiness, but never found it. But one thing kept Billie standing: music. When Billie sang, she lived. When on stage, she was free, powerful, and loved. Audiences applauded her, admired her, and loved her. Maybe her father didn't love her, but the world loved her. And maybe that was enough. Billie Holiday died in 1959, at 44, too young. But her legacy will live forever. And that legacy isn't just her music, but also her story. The story of a woman rejected, but not defeated, abandoned, but still standing, and fatherless but strong. When Clarence Holiday died, he left behind very little: some money, a few instruments, and a few recordings. He remained a small note in music history, guitarist in Fletcher Henderson Orchestra. But his greatest legacy, or curse, was his daughter, Billie Holiday. Clarence never knew Billie, never loved her, and never was a father, but he still shaped Billie's life. Because sometimes absence is more powerful than presence. Clarence's absence was felt in every corner of Billie's life, in every bad relationship, in every moment of insecurity, and in every fear of rejection. Music historians wrote very little about Clarence Holiday, because he was just an ordinary musician. But libraries full of books were written about Billie Holiday, because Billie was extraordinary. And ironically, Clarence's only lasting contribution was bringing Billie into the world, then abandoning her. If Clarence had been a father, Billie's life might have been different, maybe happier, maybe healthier, maybe longer. But maybe her music would have been different too. Maybe that fragility, that pain, and that depth wouldn't be there. Because Billie's music was born from her pain. And much of that pain came from her father. Some people defended Clarence. He was a young man, he wasn't ready yet, times were very different then. Maybe true, but that doesn't lessen Billie's pain. Some people blamed Billie. Maybe she was too demanding, maybe too emotional. But that's nonsense. A child wanting love from their father isn't demanding, it's natural. The truth is, Clarence Holiday was a coward. He denied his responsibility, denied his daughter, and eventually became an opportunist. And there's no excuse for any of that. Did Billie Holiday ever forgive Clarence? The answer is complex. Sometimes Billie seemed to have forgiven. In an interview she said, "Everyone makes mistakes. My father made mistakes, but maybe he did the best he could." But other times Billie was still angry. She told a friend, "I'll never forgive him. He should have been a father to me, but he wasn't." Maybe the truth is, Billie partially forgave, but not completely. Because to fully forgive, Clarence needed to show remorse. But Clarence never showed remorse. Even in his final moments, on his deathbed, Clarence only asked Billie to come. He didn't apologize, didn't express love. Some therapists say, forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not for the other person. Did Billie understand this? Maybe, but knowing and feeling are different things. Billie maybe intellectually forgave, but emotionally never healed. That wound always stayed there. Sometimes mild, sometimes painful, and maybe Strange Fruit was that wound flowing out. Maybe every time she sang it, Billie healed a little more. Maybe music was her therapy. Or maybe music was just a way to turn pain into something beautiful. In Billie's final years, in the late 1950s, a reporter asked, "Do you ever miss your father?" Billie was silent for a long time. Then she said, "How can you miss something you never had? I knew I had a father, but he was never a father to me. So I don't miss him. I just miss the absence of the idea of fatherhood." This answer is deep and sad. Because Billie didn't just lose Clarence, she lost the entire experience of fatherhood. And that loss was irreparable. Billie Holiday's story isn't just her story. It's the story of millions of children growing up fatherless, rejected, and abandoned. Even today, millions of children worldwide don't know their fathers, don't receive love from their fathers, and grow up fatherless. And many of these children suffer like Billie: insecurity, fear of rejection, and hunger for love. Billie's story teaches them something: you can remain standing. Even if you're rejected, even if you're abandoned, even if you grow up fatherless, you can succeed. But it's not easy. And the wound is permanent. Psychologists have long known father absence leaves deep effects on children. Research shows that children growing up fatherless experience higher rates of depression, anxiety, and relationship problems. But at the same time, some of these children show incredible resilience, like Billie Holiday. They turn pain into art, trauma into power, and loneliness into independence. But this doesn't happen with every child. Some break, and that's the tragedy. What we can do as a society: support fatherless children, mentor programs, therapy, and community support. But most importantly, ensure fathers take their responsibilities. Men like Clarence Holiday still exist. Men who impregnate, abandon, and don't father. And this is unacceptable. Because every child deserves love. Every child deserves a father, and every child has the right not to be rejected. Billie Holiday deserved this, but she didn't get it. And we must do better today. Strange Fruit is still powerful today. It's used as an anthem in the fight against racism, police brutality, and systemic injustice. But the song has another layer: personal pain. Billie Holiday sang that song the night her father died. And from that moment, the song became both political and personal. The strange fruit in the song, corpses hanging from trees, aren't just lynching victims, but also emotionally murdered people. Rejected children, abandoned spouses, and forgotten victims. Every time Billie sang Strange Fruit, she was retelling the story. But not just the story of the American South, but also her own story. The story of a girl rejected by her father. And listeners maybe didn't know, but felt it. Because Billie's voice wasn't just notes, it was lived experience. There was pain in every breath, truth in every note. And this truth was universal. Because everyone had experienced rejection in some way. Everyone had been abandoned in some way. And everyone had suffered in some way. Today Strange Fruit is still sung. Beyoncé sang it, Nina Simone sang it, and countless other artists sang it. But none sang it like Billie. Because none had lived Billie's pain. None had gone on stage the night their father died. And none had sung that song for both the world and their father. Strange Fruit continues to be Billie's song. And every time it's sung, Billie's story is told. The story of a woman rejected, but standing. Billie Holiday was rejected by her father 3 times throughout her life. But after each rejection, she stood up. The first rejection didn't destroy her. It directed her to music. The second rejection didn't stop her. It made her more determined. The third rejection didn't kill her. It gave her strange fruit. Clarence Holiday caused his daughter great pain by rejecting her. But unintentionally, he also gave her a great gift: resilience, strength, and depth. Billie made that pain into art. She turned that rejection into song. And she made that loneliness an experience shared with the whole world. Today Clarence Holiday is forgotten. But Billie Holiday is a legend. Clarence left no lasting mark in his life. But Billie changed music history. When Clarence died, nobody cried. But when Billie died, the world mourned. And the reason is simple. Clarence just lived. But Billie gave life, with her music, her voice and her story. She gave life to people. And she still does. If you grew up fatherless, were rejected, or were abandoned, remember Billie Holiday's story. You're not defeated, you're still here. And you can remain standing. Maybe the pain will never completely go away. Maybe the wound will always ache a little. But the wound doesn't have to define you. Billie's wound didn't define her. Her music defined her. Her strength defined her. And her legacy defined her. What defines you isn't your past, it's what you do now. Clarence Holiday rejected his daughter 3 times. But Billie Holiday didn't reject the world. She embraced the world, sang, and left her legacy. And that legacy will live forever. Because true strength isn't in not being rejected, it's in standing up after being rejected. And Billie Holiday always stood up.